Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Voice of the Paper, the collaborative effort between the Flat Hat News and the Podcasting Network at William and Mary. My name is Ryan Walter, and I'm joined here today by
Maggie Moore, the digital media editor.
And we have a bunch of great stories for you today that the Flat Hat will be publishing on tomorrow and that you can check out right now online. But we want to provide a little more in-depth. So why don't we start with story number one, which, Maggie, if you want to lead us off.
Yeah. So the top article on the front page this week is about Catherine Bertini. She was a journalist and documentary filmmaker who also moved into bicycling, and she hosted a talk on April 12th, talking about her effort to try and get women allowed in the Tour de France. Apparently, the Tour de France allowed women for a few years in the 50s and 80s, but because there was no media attention on them, they were cut from the competition. So her talk was about how, with enough public pressure, she and other female professional cyclists were eventually allowed to compete in 2014. It's a really cool story.
That's really awesome and a great effort that we, of course, are behind. Did Claire actually get to interview Catherine for this, or was it more just a review of the discussion that she had with the students?
I think it was just a review of the discussion that she had with the students, but Claire Hogan, who is the author of this piece, did get to interview the vice president, of the William and Mary Cycling Club, who was the group that hosted this talk.
All right, that's awesome. Moving on to our next story, this one by Charles Coleman. The title is Law School Talk Dispels misconceptions about affirmative action. Why don't you give us a little more detail about this one?
Yeah, so this piece is by Charles Coleman, who's the Flat Hat chief staff writer, and associate sociology professor Dinesh Sahoni hosted a talk about affirmative action in the law school. It was hosted by the college's Asian Pacific American Law Association, and the talk focused on mostly Asian Americans and how affirmative action affected them. And it started by looking into the original purpose of affirmative action, why it was installed, and started to look a little bit at whether it's still needed today. So a really important and relevant subject considering all the things going on in the federal government these days.
Right, absolutely informative and something that I think is a good talk to have. You can check out that article and others in the Flat Hat News tomorrow. And that brings us to our last article for the day, which, let me make sure that I found it. Yep, which is Placing the Spotlight on Women by Emma Ford, who has been on this program, or her articles have been featured on this program a number of times. Why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, so the news section does a profile every week, and this is this week's profile. It's about Sarah Marksteiner. She created the theater company Class Act. And Mark Steiner, the student who created this, is a senior currently. She's participated in a lot of different productions, both in Sinfonicron, William and Mary Theater, and then her own theater company. And the theater company they write and perform original shows, and it's really just a look at the woman behind creating that theater company and what she's done and what she's looking forward to after college.
All right. Thank you so much for the reviews of the articles and a bit of the summary. My name is Ryan Walter. This has been episode 5 of The Voice of the Paper, covering stories published on April 16th and April 17th in the Flat Hat News. Tune in next week for more. And Maggie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here.